Om Sarvadharmasthapakas Sarvadharmaswarupakah Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. We are studying here Sri Ramakrishna the Great Master, second part, as the spiritual aspirant. Sri Ramakrishna Leelaprasanga Sadhat Bhav. And in that, we have studied the preface and first para of the introduction. And the first para, it is said that in our spiritual life, in our spiritual struggle, sadhana, there are certain things which essentially come in less or more acute degree. And same thing should happen in Avatar because he is our prototype. But in the description of the different incarnations, we do not find a mention of that. As a result of which, the connection is not there between their playful activities of the childhood and the grown-up when they manifest themselves as the universal teacher. This is what was stated. And as the essential part of man's struggle, we were told that do not meet with any detailed description of the indomitable zeal and unbounded love which they nurtured in their hearts and with the help of which they proceeded to realize the truth in life, nor do we come across detailed discussions of the surges of awe and admiration, of pang and pleasure, of hope and despair, alternating with each other, grid by which they felt now elated, now dejected, though never allowing the vision of the goal to grow dim even for a moment. So these were the points discussed. Now we come to the second para, why we do not find this in the different incarnations. Devotees do not like the idea that incarnations are imperfect at any period of their life. That is the reason that imperfect, they cannot be their incarnations. And so these parts they do not allow to come to the public view. The reason for this is difficult to envisage. Difficult means it is in the depth of the Bhakta's mind. Perhaps. So by inference he is giving the reason. Perhaps those things have not been recorded on account of the excessive devotion on the part of the devotees. Excessive? Yes. The devotee's devotion is not based upon facts of life. That is called excessive. devotion on the part of the devotees. Perhaps they were hesitant to attribute human imperfection. As a man, there are imperfections. Human imperfections to divine character. And avatars coming from above, so they do not are not human, and therefore thought it reasonable to shut them out from people's gaze. A famous example is how the character of Sita has been dealt with in Valmiki Ramayana, Tulsi Ramcharitmanas, Kamba Ramayana of Tamil. So we find the factual Valmiki Ramayana that Ravana lifted to Sita and took her in the chariot and went away. Now, Tulsi finds it very difficult how Ravan can touch Sita. And so, he devises a peculiar theory, that Rama deposited Sita to the god of fire. How, when, why, don't ask. Rama deposited Sita to the god of fire and a Nakli Sita, shadow of Sita, fire god gave him. And with that shadow Sita, Maya Sita, he went to the forest. And for that Maya Sita, he wept so much. Can we believe that? We have to believe, because Sita, how can Sita be touched by Ravana? Kamba Ramayana has found his own way. Ravana did not lift Sita directly, but he put his hand below the earth on which Sita was sitting. And along with that earth, he lifted Sita. So he did not touch Sita. So this is how they did it. Valmiki does not require all this, because Valmiki is relating to Rama as he was, factual, historical. And there, this is the difference. He does not feel that he is lowering Sita. This touch is physical. Sita is not mentally touched by Ravana or anybody. Swamiji was asked about Jesus, how Jesus could be crucified. So it was some shadow Jesus who was crucified, isn't it? Swamiji had to reply that everything in the world is a shadow. So this peculiar tendency of the devotees is called excessive devotion, which does not want to show any imperfection in the life of incarnation. Now, what do we lose by that? Incarnation becomes cut off from us. When we are asked to do this or that or sadhana, how we can do? He did because he was the incarnation. The very purpose of incarnation is lost thereby. God is God. Why did he become man? Why did he appear as a man? Because to show how a man should be, how a man could be, to show that God appears as man. And if we cut him off from all humanity, then we are losing a big chance of our life. So that is what Saradananda Swami wants to point out. Especially this sadhana. I described to you day before yesterday, conversation between my Guruji and Mahapurush Maharaj. So Mahapurush Maharaj showed, see the sadhana, see the details of the sadhana, and then find out whether he is a man or a saint or Superman or God himself. Not only go by the way that he did sadhana. So Saradananda Swami is now analyzing this very point from people's gaze. Or it may be the devotees thought that they would be doing more good. That means either nothing or less or more. They will be doing more good to men by holding before their eyes as an ideal the fully developed noble ideas and sentiments of these great ones than by tracing the history of their superhuman efforts to arrive at them. Superhuman effort to arrive at truth. When they show that we can do human effort to arrive at truth. And so that is necessary. But they thought that what is the use in showing the struggle? See how the glorious God they were and be devoted to them. So we remain devotees of the Lord, but we lose to find Him as the ideal man. And that is the purpose for His being born. That in this very man's body and mind, God can be manifested. My holding before their eyes as an ideal, that will always remain an ideal. The fully developed noble ideas and sentiments of these great ones, than by tracing the history of their superhuman efforts to arrive at them. In Leela Prasanga itself, Saradananda Swami has first written the Guru Bhav, and there he has shown the perfect master. But he added the Sadhak Bhav, and Sadhak Bhav is the most important part of Thakur's Leela. Because the question is, we require sadhana. And therefore, they deemed it useless to place on the record those endeavors. The devotees like to see their beloved master, ever perfect. They refuse to admit that because they have assumed human forms, any kind of human weakness or lack of insight or power could ever creep into their character. When they assume human body, the evolution be like human. They are always anxious to see the whole universe inside the divine children. And not only are ever eager to read the experience and intelligence of an adult in the meaningless acts and efforts of their childhood, but would strain every nerve to view them as the perfect embodiments of omniscience and omnipotence and of universal love and tolerance. Example why he is quoting is Krishna as a child ate clay, mud. And when Yashoda challenged him and opened his mouth, she saw the whole universe in that mouth. Now that is all right. She saw the whole universe is all right. But he did eat mud because he was a child. Because children eat without discrimination. But they will say, no, 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 no. He ate mud so that Yashoda could see the universe in his mouth. So, this connection is to remove, to show him as never imperfect. Why eat mud? Because he wanted to show to Yashoda that universe is in my mouth. So that is how they connect. The second part is, so this is the first part. They are always anxious to see the whole universe inside the divine children. And not only are ever eager to read the experience and intelligence of an adult in the meaningless acts. Now there are several stories. Rama wants to play with the crows. Rama wants to play with the moon. Is it possible? Is it humanly possible? But he wants that. Why? Because he is a human being. And he asked, give me that moon, catch the crow. So they do not want to show that they lack anything. Perfect embodiments of omniscience and omnipotence and of universal love and tolerance. Love and tolerance. Vishwajanin Udarata or Prem. Okay. But where is tolerance? Mm-hmm. Tolerance is not the happy word here. Universal Catholicity and love. Broadness. No wonder, therefore, they come to the conclusion that it is only in order to elude the eyes of men that the incarnations of God feign the mental efforts of spiritual practices, feign, don't, show without reality. So why they are doing sadhana? Feign. They are not really doing sadhana. Not only sadhana, in order to elude the eyes of men. So when they are doing sadhana, people will think that, oh, they are not God. So that is eluding their vision. When the mental efforts of spiritual practices and the bodily states of hunger, sleep, fatigue, disease, death, etc. So they are feeling hungry because they are human body. But no. They are showing hunger so that people should not know they are God. Sleep. God does not require sleep. But when he has assumed a human body, he requires sleep. No. They are showing sleep so that people should not catch that they are God. Fatigue, tiredness. How God can be tired? But he has assumed a human body, so it gets tired. Disease. We do not get any description except for that means feigning. Krishna says, I am having headache, I have cut my finger. How it is possible for God to suffer like that? Oh, only to test the love of others, only to test how much they love him. So this is how we interpret fatigue, disease, death. God can never die. The body will die. So this difference they do not understand. Even in our own time, we have known many eminent devotees of our Master having a firm conviction that his disease was a feigning of this sort. So he is just showing disease, he has no disease. And he will recover when he likes. It does not stand to reason that such an idea interferes with devotion. So Sardan Swamiji is thinking that why they do like this? Because of this. But that basis is itself wrong. We must come with the full facts of their life as human beings. Then only there is empathy. Then only we understand that they are like ours. Then only we are inspired to struggle as they have struggled. And that is the most important point. It is due to mere weakness that the devotees arrive at such a conclusion. So it is not devotion, it is weakness. They do not like to attribute human efforts, aims, etc. to the incarnations of God. only because such a notion they think could harm their devotion. That means if he is man, then we will not be devoted to him. He is God appearing as man. Both sides should never be forgotten. Therefore, we have nothing to say against them. Because they want their devotion, let them have. But such weakness, it is certain, is seen in a devotee when his devotion is not mature enough. That is one thing. They are doing that, but their devotion is not mature devotion. It is elementary. It is only in that state of devotion, in the mature devotion, that he cannot think of the divine Lord as devoid of powers. So main thing is powers. That is bhapka, ostentation. In course of time, when devotion matures and the love of God deepens considerably, such thoughts regarding the powers of God are resented as veritable obstacles to the path of devotion, and the devotee carefully avoids them from a distance. So, if we see the big powers, we feel a difference between him and us. That is not useful. We see that although Sri Krishna's foster mother Yashoda daily experienced the divine powers of her boy, she looked upon him just as a boy and fondled or chastised him accordingly. So see, she forgot that he is God, though she knew it. And so she would deal him as a child, and that will help him grow. The gopis, similarly, could not attribute any relation to Sri Krishna other than that of a beloved, in spite of their knowledge that he is the very cause of the universe. So, Krishna is the cause of the universe. But for our progress, we require to love him in a particular relation. So, gopis thought of him as beloved, Madhurva. They knew he is the cause of the universe. But for our progress dealing, we should deal him as a man behaves. Otherwise, he is God. The master's teaching, love relation to the intimacy of thou and I cannot stand when knowledge of powers intervenes, and nobody's spiritual aptitude should be hampered with. Two things are there. So, if we see God with powers always, we cannot come close to Him. That in English, though not used now, you and thou. Thou shows closeness, but we do not use it. You. In Bengali, apni, tumi, tui. Marathi, apan, tumi, tu. So, if we use such a thing, it creates difference. So they know he is God, but they want to love him. Arjuna, when he saw the Vishwarup Darshan, he said, enough, I have seen. Now please become a man for me to love you. The master's teaching, loving relation to intimacy, stand when knowledge of powers intervene. Then this I, you, singular will not do. And nobody's spiritual attribute should be tempered with. So that is their bhav. We should not tamper with it, but they should grow and understand the real relation. When the devotees of the Master express their great eagerness to have some kind of vision as a direct evidence of particular powers of God, endearingly would he say to them many a time, it is not good to have such visions. Fear will intervene when you see powers. Feeding and dressing him and the deep loving relation of thou and I will all cease. Alas, how often did we want to feel piqued on such occasions and think that he evaded our request only because he would not bestow on us the vision. If, however, at that time any devotee took courage and said feelingly with a firm faith, your grace can make the impossible possible. Please be compassionate and grant me the vision. The master would reply in an endearing tone, can I bring about anything, my child? What mother wills happens. Thus answered, if you would still insist and say, your will be mother's will, mother's too. The master's usual reply was, my child, I do wish that all of you may have all kinds of spiritual states and visions. But is it fulfilled? Instead of resisting even then, if the devotee persisted in this faith, the master only expressed his love to him by a gentle smile and an affectionate look, or would sometimes say, what shall I say? Let mother's will be done. So he is avoiding to interfere with their faith. But the master, although pressed so importunately, never tried to break that firm belief of the devotee and destroy his spiritual attitude. Many a time did we see such behavior on the part of the master and hear him say, the spiritual attitude of no one should be destroyed. So now he comes upon a different topic. An example of the destruction of spiritual attitude on the occasion of the Shivratri at the Kashipur Ghat. Although not directly connected with the subject matter of this introduction, but it is an important point in spiritual life. The topic once raised should be explained to the reader with reference to an incident. The power of transmitting to others the capacity to realize spiritual truths by a mere touch or by willing falls to the lot of very few aspirants. That means when they grow very much in their spiritual power, they can touch and change the attitude, or by will, they can change him. The master told us time and again that Swami Vivekananda in course of time would have the privilege of possessing the power and there will with and therewith do much good to the people. Such a highly qualified person as the Swami is indeed rare in the world. So it is not given to everybody. The master knew it well from the very beginning of their meeting and started molding his character and religious life in a special way by imparting the knowledge of the unity of existence spoken of in the Vedanta. So Advaita is the truth and he can conceive Advaita. So he started teaching him Advaita from the beginning. Now two things. Swamiji does not want to accept. So he will not force that and ultimately bring him to that. So Bhava on the surface and in depth, both he is keeping. Accustomed to the dualism mode of worshipping of the Brahma Samaj. So Brahma Samaj were the religious people and they worship God by dualism. The Swami regarded the non-dualistic mode taught in the Vedanta as a blasphemy It is criticizing God, Ninda of Ishwar, if we show that we can be identified with him. But the master tried in various ways to make him practice it. The Swami said, as soon as I went to Dakshineshwar, the master gave me those books which he forbade others to read. That means they will not have that conception in the beginning. They will get it at some point. As soon as I went to Dakshineshwar, the master gave me those books which he forbade others to read. Among other books, a copy of the Ashtavakra Samhita was in his room. When the master found anything reading that book, he would forbid him and would give him instead such books as Mukti and How to Attain It, the Bhagavad Gita, or some Purana. So there, from the beginning to end is described. So he would give that book. And to Vivekananda, the finished product of Advaita he would give. When the master found anyone reading that book, Ashtavakra Samhita, he would forbid him and would give him instead such books as Mukti and How to Attain It, the Bhagavad Gita, or some Purana. That means showing the way to progress. But scarcely had I gone to him, who is he? But scarcely had I gone to him that he took out that book and asked me to read it. Or he would ask me to read some part of the Adhyatma Ramayana, which is full of non-dualistic ideas. I said, and sometimes bluntly, what is the use of reading these books? It is a sheer even. It is a sin even to think I am God. The book reaches the same blasphemy. It should be burned. The book teaches the same blasphemy. It should be burned. The master smiled and said, do I ask you to read it for yourself? In this human Leela, the body was suffering from cancer. And for that, they have brought the homeopathic doctor. Please do it. In that case, you will not have to think that you are God. I had to read a little for him at his request. At his request I am reading. I am not attached with that. Again, although he was training the Swami that way, the master was guiding Swami Brahmananda and his other boy devotees in their spiritual lives in various other ways. Some through the worship of God with forms, some with that of God with attributes but without forms, others through pure unqualified devotion, yet others again devotion mingled with discrimination between the real and the unreal, and so on. Thus, although Swami Vivekananda and other boy devotees sat and slept, and Vivekananda and other boys' devotion and mind slept, ate, and walked together and destroyed the seed. Slept, ate, and walked together and discussed together religious doctrines in the company of the master at Dakshineshwar. The latter was training them all in diverse ways according to their peculiar tastes and tenderness. Okay. So now he's quoting an incident. It was March 1886. The master at the Kashipur garden was daily becoming weaker on account of a disease in his throat. But he engaged himself with a far greater and much more instituting enthusiasm than before in molding the spiritual life of his devotees, particularly with the life of Swami Vivekananda. We have seen that they became associated with Swamiji. He did not stop merely with teaching the Swami the path of sadhana and helping him to carry the teaching only into practice. So, no separate philosophy. Why the gods are created? We require the white cloth immediately. What happens if it is destroyed? There is something is. Training them all in devotee always according to their peculiar tastes and tendencies. So it is difficult to do, but not impossible, and it is essential to do. So Thakur is teaching them. It was March 1886. The master at the Kashipur garden was daily becoming weaker on account of a disease in his throat. But he engaged himself with a far greater and much more instinctively conditions than before in molding the spiritual lives of his devotees, particularly in the life of Swami Vivekananda. He did not stop merely with teaching the Swami the path of knowledge and helping him to carry the teaching into practice, but was also training them up in something else extremely busy to prevent that this either to prevent the other boy devotees from returning to worldly life and how to guide them and hold them together. Every evening after dusk, he would ask all others to move away, call the Swami to himself and teach him all those for true and strong rishis. So that is going on. He did not stop merely with teaching the Swami the path of sadhana and helping him to ever to reach into practice, but was also training him up in something else, namely how to prevent the other boy devotees from returning to worldly life and how to guide them and hold them together. So Swami Vivekananda was being trained to be the leader. Every evening after dusk, he would ask all others to move away and call the Swami to himself and teach him all these for 2 or 3 hours every day, continuously, sometimes dividing him into a discussion from the words and account of the master, sometimes drawing him into a discussion. So he wanted Swami Vivekananda to know everything analytically, because that is how he will face in the world. It seemed to most of the devotees that he was feigning the throat disease in order to establish the older said, and there would be all right as soon as their purpose was founded as they had rolled out their Swami Vivekananda elaborates that the master was arranging everything and preparing, as it were, to take a long, long leave of the devotees. It is therefore doubtful, however, whether even he was always conscious of it. Okay. That means deliberate planning. Even there was a slight awakening in the Swami of the power of transmitting spirituality to others by touch. No doubt, he had felt that power arise within him from time to time, but he had not yet tested the truth or falsity of the proofs of that truth of doctrine of non-duality. I am touching anyone that way. Still, in various ways, he got the proofs of the truth of the doctrine of non-duality spoken of in the Vedanta and came to believe in it and tried to introduce that doctrine among the devotees, young or old, married or unmarried, with the help of reason and interference. So, without considering any other thing, by logic, he wants people to learn that. There arose then a keen controversy over it, leading or shape differences of opinion. So, okay, understood. Nay, agitation among the devotees, for it was the peculiar nature of the Swami to assert vehemently what he understood to be the act and to extort its acceptance from others by means of logical arguments. So Swamiji thought that if I logically convince them, then they have to accept that. Then the boy Swami did not realize, so why all this? He has said boy Swami, not mature enough. Then he may be having big powers, but not matured enough. Then the boy Swami did not realize that truth in the practical world, that truth in the practical world assumed different forms according to different conditions and capabilities. Yes, it was the Swami, it was the Shivratri in the month of Falgun. 3 or 4 of the boy devotees were keeping the fast with the Swami. They had a mind to spend the night in worship and in keeping vigil. Lest the noise would disturb the master's nest, the worship was arranged in a small room built for the kitchen, situated a little away to the east of the residential quarters. There was a fair shower of rain after dusk. The devotees were delighted to see in the master of newly formed clouds flashes of lightning ever and ever, simultaneously simulating the matted hair of Shiva. So they want to show themselves they are like Shiva. After finishing the worship, japa and meditation pertaining to the first quarter of the night, Shivratri has 4 quarters and 4 worships are done. So first night is over. The Swami was taking rest and conversing with others, sitting on the worshipper's seat. One of the companions went out to prepare a smoke for him, and another were towards the residential quarters on an important work. Okay. Just at that time, the Swami Just at that time, a keen feeling of that divine power strong arose suddenly to this Swami. Okay. He wanted to observe its effect by putting it to test him. He wanted to observe its effect by putting it to test that night and said to Swami A. Abhedananda, who was sitting in front of him, "Do touch me for a while." In the meantime, the boy who had gone to prepare tobacco entered the room and saw the Swami seeing motionless in meditation. That showing the exact characters. Who was sitting in front of him. "Do not touch me for a while," Swamiji said. "Oh, oh, oh, do touch me for a while." Hmm. In the meantime, the boy who had gone to prepare tobacco entered the room and saw the Swami sitting motionless in meditation, and A, with his eyes shut, touching the Swami's right knee with his right hand. Although he noticed was rapidly trembling, a minute hand, which he noticed was rapidly trembling, a minute or two elapsed that way, when the Swami opened his eyes and said, "That is enough. How did you know? How did you feel?" A. Abhedananda, exactly like something entered into my body, whom one holds an election to butterfly, exactly like something entering into one who who one holds an electric battery, one's hand trembling all the whole. Okay. He asked Vedanta to touch him, and when he touched him, it was vibrating like the electric vibration. The other person asked, "A, was your hand trembling of itself when you touched the Swami?" So observer saw that Swamiji is touching and he is shaking. A, yes, I could not keep it steady, though I tried to. That means it was naturally, deliberately not being trembled. There was then no more talk about it. Swami smoked. All of them applied to their minds to the worship and meditation pertaining to the second quarter of the night. A entered into deep mid-wicket. A entered into deep meditation at that time. We had never seen him enter into such deep meditation before. The whole of his hand became still, which with his neck and head slightly bent. The consciousness of the outer world appeared to have completely disappeared for some time. Everyone present thought that he had such meditation as a death of having YouTube like view, a visual, a little while previously. The Roman also noticed that none of his education enam karme jai. Okay. Then After the last quarter's worship was over at 4 in the morning, Swami Ramakrishna came to the worship room and said to the Swami, "The Master wants you." Soon, as he was told, the Swami went up to the Master in the big rooms on that bra. Now, okay. So the Swami, the Master wants you. As soon as he was told, the Swami went up to the Master in his room on the first floor of the residential quarters. Ramakrishna also accompanied him to attend for the service of the Master. Okay. No sooner had the Master seen the Swami than he said, "What is this? Expenditure with hardly any accumulation." That means he has known everything. Huh? Allow it first to accumulate well in yourself, that power. Then you will know where and how to spend it. Okay? Mother herself will teach. That means from inside you will know that the power when it should be used. Don't you see what harm you have done to him by injecting your attitude of mind into him? That is the main point. He, he has been progressing till now with a particular mental attitude, the whole of which has now been destroyed, like a miscarriage during the south month of pregnancy. What's done is done. They don't act so threateningly, so thoughtlessly from time on. The boy, however, is lucky that greater harm will not befall him. Some confusion has not happened. I shall manage. Let him do what he likes. The whole of which has now been destroyed like a miscarriage during the 6 months of pregnancy. Okay. The boy, however, is lucky that greater harm has not befallen him. Okay. The Swami said afterwards, I became completely flabbergasted. The Master could know whatever we did at the time of the worship. What else could I do but remain silent when he scolded me like that? As a result of this, not only was the old spiritual attitude complete of A completely destroyed, but the new attitude of non-dualism, being difficult to grasp and assimilate quickly, was also misunderstood. And in the nature of non-dualism, he would behave like an atheist, sometimes committing improper act, although a contrary to scriptural engine cracks. And though this master saw this, then taught him the truth of non-duality and afterwards presented our mistakes he was committing in the day-to-day act of his life. It was long after the passing away of the master that a guided by that attitude could lightly adjust his new rise to the actions of that idea. Okay. So this is about what Swami Vivekananda did. He inserted his bhav. When Master touched everybody in 1st January, he said, let you be Chaitanya. So in his own way, everybody rose. That is the big difference. So that is one point. When sporting like a man, the divine behaves like a man. So not feigning, but because the whole thing is a sport, he is a man, so he behaves like a man. That is the natural explanation. This topic of not destroying the bhav had come, so that incident has been described. To the class of devotees who think that the efforts of the incarnations of God for the attainment of truth or fullest manifestation thereof in life are mere simulations. Our answer is that we never heard the Master express that view. Okay. Rather, we have heard him say often, when the divine sports as a human being, he behaves exactly like an ordinary man and experiences weal and woe and attains perfection by dint of personal effort, endeavor, and austerity. The history of the religions of the world bears witness to this, and it is clear that they were it not so, and it is clear that were it not so, the very purpose of the incarnation of the divinity would be defeated. If he remains God, then what is the use? The Master's teachings to the devotees can be broadly divided into two classes. Okay. So we'll continue reading. Today, what we learned that imperfections in incarnations are natural because he has assumed a human form. Leela of a special type. Secondly, nobody's attitude should be destroyed, and Swamiji did it. Why? He was a small child. That is the only reason. And Thakur said not much is lost because Thakur's presence, Thakur will correct it. But it took long time. Okay, we'll take you tomorrow. Om Sarvadharma Stapakasvam Sarvadharma Swarupakah Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Nama Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam.